The phenomenon of people being declared dead and then coming back to life is known as Lazarus syndrome. It's named after the biblical story of Lazarus, who was raised from the dead by Jesus. The syndrome is extremely rare, with only a handful of cases reported in medical literature. It's thought to be caused by a combination of factors including delayed resuscitation efforts, hypothermia, and certain medications. In 2012, Li Zafeng, a 95-year-old Chinese woman, was pronounced deceased. 2 days after her declared passing, she was placed in a coffin in her house and left open for friends and family to bid their final farewells. But the day before the funeral, neighbors found an empty coffin and later discovered a 95-year-old who had since woken up in her kitchen cooking. Upon being found, she explained, "I slept for a long time. When I woke up, I felt incredibly hungry and wanted to cook something to eat. I pushed the lid for a long time to climb out." Despite cheating death, Mrs. Zafeng was left without any possessions because, according to her community beliefs, after a person dies, all their belongings must be burnt. Zafeng's story is a fascinating one and is not the only one of its kind. Known as the woman who lived once but was buried twice, Marjorie McCall resided in the Irish town of Logan, County Armagh, in the 17th century. McCall apparently suffered a fever in 1695 and was soon pronounced deceased. On the day of her burial, her body was dressed up and interred at Shankill Graveyard. One night, her coffin was visited by grave robbers who dug her up to steal her valuable jewelry. While doing so, McCall suddenly awoke, scaring off her would-be robbers. She made her way out of the grave and walked back home, where upon seeing her husband collapsed out of shock. McCall reportedly lived to have another child before passing on later in life. In 2010, 80-year-old Maria de Jesus Arroyo was pronounced dead after a heart attack and was taken to a local LA morgue. Just days later, as morticians returned to pull her body from the lockers to prepare her for the funeral, instead of a peacefully deceased corpse, they found an unzipped body bag and a corpse covered with bruises. It was determined that she tried to get out, breaking her nose in the process, but she eventually froze to death. In 2014, a 78-year-old man in Mississippi was declared dead by the coroner, only to be found alive and kicking in his body bag at the funeral home. A 91-year-old woman in Poland woke up in a morgue after being declared dead by doctors. These cases are rare, but they do happen, and they raise some interesting questions about the nature of death and the limits of medical science.